Hello, Abigail here, and this is the overview of the astrology of Pisces season. This season is something extra special. So much happens. There's kind of fewer smaller things, although those are still happening, and a lot of really big transits, kind of beginning, ending, peaking, fading. There's just a lot going on. Kind of just to, it starts out on February 18th. That's when we get the sun moving into Pisces. And it's a halvesy season for eclipses. So the first part, we don't have an eclipse, but we are feeling that build to the eclipse. Obviously, as we move closer to the nodes, which have entered Pisces and Virgo back in January. My brain just died. Back in January. And so now we've moved into kind of not quite official because we're still having our final Aries eclipse when it comes to Aries season, but we're getting into the nitty gritty. And there's a lot that is happening. The Pisces eclipse is conjunct a lot of things. No, the Virgo eclipse. What are my notes for if I'm not going to read them? The Virgo eclipse is conjunct, the sun is conjunct a bunch of things, which puts that moon in opposition. So, really big earth shaking stuff happening this season. Let's get into the notes. Um, so, the big thing we start off with, kind of, it's several days in, pardon me, is Mars stationing direct. This video is already a shambles. But we're going to keep going because I don't have any confidence that any preceding recordings are going to not be in shambles. That's what you get for watching a video with an autistic ADHD person with dyslexia. So we start with Mars direct. This is really exciting. This has been a uber long transit. It started on December 6th, or 5th, December 6th. It started on December 6th. We have been in it for quite some time, and that shadow period was really long too. Things in astrology, it's like we're in a great big ocean, and something moves in that ocean and those waves reverberate. So it's never like Mars retrograde is over, we're done. There is this extended ripple effect. And so we're going to be going through the post retrograde shadow period for several months. Because that's how long it takes Mars to get back to where it started in the early degrees of Leo. But we do get it to station direct. It does feel good to finally have the planet of action and passion and forward progression once again progressing forwardly. It is still in Cancer, however, we are still revisiting the themes that we've gone over. Something that's important to note is we're going to have that Mars eclipse at the exact place. That Mars is going to be at the exact place that we had the last Mars eclipse. So it's just important to note we're going to be seeing a lot of renewed themes as we move through it. So we're not going to be over it in Pisces season, but we're definitely starting to sort through. I always say that, when any type of retrograde, they kind of plows back through and wrecks everything. And then you have to kind of go through and pick up the pieces and put, the things that you want to keep where they belong and throw out the stuff that got completely destroyed and process. If you've gone through a big loss or a big shift in your life, this is going to be kind of, dealing with the aftermath of that, good or bad. This is neutral. But just be aware on the 23rd, we do get Mars direct. Thank goodness. I have a difficultly placed Mars. And so whenever Mars is in trouble, I'm always like, and no, I'm not Mars ruled, but it does rule my 12th and my 8th that all have personal planets in them. Anyways, then we get the new moon in Pisces. This is really a beautiful, refreshing one. It's also the last Pisces new moon we're going to have for a hot second that is not an eclipse. So this is kind of a last hurrah, but also a beautiful way to commit to this kind of eclipse cycle that we're going to go through into 2026. And also, it's kind of a clearer vision. You get a clearer vision when you're not in an eclipse moon. So this is the time to set intentions and desires around these eclipses, because once we're in it, it is what it is. There's not much you can do to shift eclipse energies. Similar to a lot of difficult transits, I say clear the house, batten down the hatches, put things that you value in safe places and hope that, the rampaging planet doesn't smack into it and break it. So this is a new moon to clear space for the eclipse energy. So when that comes, keep that in mind. Then on the 1st of March, we go into the Venus retrograde. Important to note, all of Pisces season is either in a Venus shadow or in the Venus retrograde. So we're already dealing with these kind of complicated Venusian issues. Also, Venus is in detriment in our sweet little Aries, which I adore because I'm a detriment Venus, but it does make it difficult. And then as it continues to retrograde and goes into Pisces, we also go into an exalted Venus. So there is going to be a very kind of binary experience in this Venus retrograde to kind of keep an eye out on. And it's going to be a bit of a long slog. Venus retrogrades affect different people differently. If you have Venus retrograde, this is an energy you're aware of. It doesn't mean it's not difficult, but it means that you've kind of experienced this consistently throughout your life. I often find people with retrograde planets during that specific retrograde being like, why are you all running around screaming? Isn't this normal? So, if you have a retrograde Venus, this is going to affect you differently. Something important to note is we are going to have a Mercury retrograde stacked on top of this in similar degrees. So keep that, in mind, especially if you're Mercury ruled like me. It's going to be a very intense time. It's also important to note what the rulers in your chart of these planets are. And even if you have, a Venus that's not being aspected by this, moment in time, check who's ruling it. For instance, my Venus is ruled by Mars, and this is my Venus return. So not only have I been in a kind of Venusian Mars story already, I'm also going through a Venus Venus moment. And that's a way that you can read your chart, this multi-layered approach, where you're like, well, this has been really rough, but I'm not really seeing it. Go to the ruler. Go to what perfection year you're in. Go to your solar arc chart. There's multiple ways to understand the chart. Look at your chart in a different reading method. And this is coming from someone who really prefers to read in whole sign. But looking at your chart in the context of a different chart system can be really helpful because it puts it in, possibly will put it in a different house. Anyway, so multiple techniques for reading this. I will say retrogrades, great time to get readings. While everything is slowed down, oftentimes we have more time to process and we often need more help. So if you need to get a reading, have your own reader, want to get one from me, this is a good time. Eclipse season is a great time for it, just as a comforting support even. So we haven't quite gotten to the Mercury, retrograde yet time wise on this kind of overview. The next step is on the 3rd, where Mercury enters Aries. Mercury moves pretty fast. So, bing, bang, boom, we're going to get to the retrograde. Then on the 14th of March, we get that total lunar eclipse in Virgo. It's going to be really intense. Obviously, I'll be making a video once we come up on it, but it is going to be a lot. It is going to be conjunct that north node. Neptune is going to be quasi involved. I'm actually pretty for sure Neptune. Did I miss this in my notes? No, Abigail. Give me a second as I look at my secondary notes. Because yes, we're all very involved. Give me a moment. When does... Okay. Good. For 5 seconds I was like, did Neptune move? No. Neptune shifts right around the Aries eclipse into Aries. So that should be fun. But we still have that Neptune conjunction. We'll have Saturn involved. It is going to be a really big moment. So the 14th, be aware, this is also the kind of official beginning of eclipse season, even though we've been moving towards it. And I find the most impactful time of eclipse season isn't necessarily always on the eclipse date. It is that 2-week period between eclipses where we're kind of in this time portal where anything that the universe wants to wrap up or that needs to go or that is blocking you or that is holding you back or that needs to be shift, the universe is going to deal with it. And this, like I said, is neutral. It can be something we consider good, it can be something we consider bad. Oftentimes, in these moments, at the time, the eclipse removal service seems really unnecessary and painful. However, years later, I have found personally that what happens between eclipses ends up in your favor over time. Doesn't mean that you wanted that thing to happen. Doesn't mean that you're happy that I think a good example from my perspective is my brother died between eclipses. Um, Devastating. Wish it never happened. However, if he hadn't passed, I would not be on this path right now. Absolutely know that for certain. It gave me courage. So while it's difficult, it is often necessary to move us forward. And you can still hate the thing that happened and also know that you wouldn't be the same person and that the reason you have the things you have now is because that event happened. So just so you know. Then on my glasses, Mercury 15th, we get Mercury retrograde and it stations retrograde at 9 degrees, the Venus retrograde station at 10 degrees. So there's this really big story around 9 and 10 degrees of Aries. So if you have any planets there, also or in Libra in opposition or in the cardinal square, so Capricorn or Cancer, these are really big. This is a really big story for you. And then of course, mutable signs. Once they both go into Pisces, your mutable signs are going to be kicked off. That's going to kick off. So pretty much everyone's affected. Obviously, yes. Fixed signs are slightly exempt. And then last but not least, we head into Aries season on the 20th. So this is a really big shift. Also, it's important to note that all of the planets moving through Pisces, so Sun and Mercury specifically, are going to be hitting Saturn, North Node, Neptune. All of those things are getting a passover. And then when Venus and, Mercury in retrograde season, so and then once we're kind of in Aries season, are going to come back. And while they're not going to be conjunct all of those planets again, they're going to be around them. So just kind of be aware of the stories that are being told. Astrology is very much a storytelling technique. I of course believe in its divinatory processes and stuff, but it's also about the stories that we tell. So look at the stories that the universe is telling to you during this season specifically. And also because a lot of this is carrying over into Aries season, keep that in mind as we move and shift through these things. Anyways, that is my overview. It is intense. I know we get out of the Mars retrograde and then 2 weeks later it's like Venus retrograde and we were also in shadow period, so it didn't really feel like a break. Important to note, we're going from Mars stationing direct in not quite a place it's happy in to Venus stationing retrograde and Mercury stationing retrograde in a Mars ruled sign. Um, and then we also have a Mars ruled eclipse in Aries season. So the Martian stories are not ending. We're going to be continuing to move through this and understand it and to digest what this all means. So hang in there. I do think some really wonderful things are going to come out of Pisces season, but I do think it's going to be like a constant flip flop between things that we're like, why would this ever happen to me? And oh my gosh, this is incredible. So just be aware. It's very much the vibe of an eclipse season that happens in one sign, starts in one side and ends in another sign. Anyways, my loves, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments. Likes are deeply appreciated. Please subscribe.